Picture this, a shallow, murky swamp, 260 million years ago. The sun is beating down, the water is teeming with little fish, insects, and the occasional unsuspecting reptile. Everything seems normal, until you notice the floor moving, or maybe not moving because it's lying flat, almost invisible. Then, in a blink, it snaps, teeth everywhere, dinner served. Yeah, that happened. We're talking about amphibians, but not the cute, bug-chasing, pond-hopping kind you'd see today. No, these guys had decided that subtlety, low-to-the-ground stealth, and a pancake-like body shape were the ultimate recipe for carnivorous domination. Flat, wide, and deadly, they were the swamp floor equivalent of a land shark disguised as breakfast. Fish didn't stand a chance. Smaller amphibians didn't stand a chance. Heck, even some reptiles got an unpleasant surprise when these flattened predators lurked just below the surface. So how did a bunch of normally harmless amphibians suddenly turn into literal killing pancakes? And why would evolution take them from cute little wetland critters to ambush predators that make your worst nightmare look polite? Grab a cup of whatever keeps you awake, because we're diving headfirst into the murky, tooth-filled waters of the late Permian. And trust me, it's not going to be gentle. Before the world had carnivorous pancakes lurking in its swamps, amphibians were, frankly, the slightly awkward middle children of the prehistoric ecosystem. It's the late Permian period, roughly 260 million years ago. Imagine the Earth as a humid sauna with massive rivers snaking through vast wetlands, dotted with ferns, horsetails, and towering conifers. This was a world where water ruled, and amphibians ruled the water. Or at least they thought they did. The amphibians of the time were mostly temnospondyls, a diverse group ranging from tiny, salamander-like creatures to imposing monsters over 2 meters long. Their typical diet wasn't exactly terrifying: insects, worms, and small fish. But the world around them was changing. Rivers shrank, swamps dried, and the competition for food was brutal. Reptiles were starting to diversify, and predators like gorgonopsids were slowly creeping into what used to be amphibian turf. If you were a small temnospondyl, life was about to get, well, let's just say messy. These swamps were crowded. You had amphibians jostling for food, fish darting between plants, and enormous dragonfly-like insects buzzing overhead like tiny helicopters. Temnospondyls were adaptable, but being slightly taller than a puddle only got you so far. Evolution, as it always does when things get tight, started playing with body plans. Some species began flattening out, literally. Instead of standing tall, they hugged the swamp floor, eyes on top, jaws ready to snap. The low profile offered a huge advantage in ambushing prey, and, let's be honest, made them look like edible pancakes floating in a pond. Now picture this: a shallow river in what's now Russia. There's a temnospondyl, maybe a few meters long, lying flat against the muddy bottom. Its wide body spreads like a rug across the swamp floor, eyes peeking up just above the water. Fish swim by, thinking, hey, nice and calm today. That calm doesn't last. Teeth emerge from the water's surface, and lunch is over. That's the kind of swamp life these amphibians were building toward: ambush predators in disguise. But why flatten out? Besides hiding from predators and sneaking up on prey, flattening increased their surface area, helping with respiration in oxygen-poor water. A tall, bulky amphibian would struggle in shallow, stagnant pools. Low, flat, and wide made them both stealthy hunters and efficient survivors. Evolution didn't give them wings or venom. It gave them a pancake body and a mouth full of teeth. Perfect. So the stage was set. These swamps were becoming arenas where amphibians could either adapt or get eaten. Normal amphibians, the pond-hopping bug catchers, were slowly giving way to something far stranger: flat, wide predators that could lie in wait like a sticky rug of death. And yes, when we say death, we mean literally everything smaller than them was lunch. By the end of the late Permian, flattening wasn't just an odd trait, it was the defining feature of a new predator strategy. The amphibians had stopped being ordinary. They were morphing into something grotesquely efficient, what we can only describe, with a straight face, as carnivorous pancakes. Alright, now we're getting to the good stuff. Meet the amphibians that make your average frog look like a harmless gummy bear. The flattened temnospondyls, aka carnivorous pancakes. Think platyhystrix and eriops, creatures that were about as subtle as a wet rug lying across the swamp floor, but somehow way deadlier. Take platyhystrix, for instance. Its name literally means flat spine, which is accurate if by spine you include a sail sticking out of its back like some bizarre prehistoric fan. But the real star is its body. Wide, low, pancake-like, it could lie in the mud with only its eyes and nostrils showing. Fish swimming by? Lunch. Smaller amphibians? Snack. Some unlucky reptiles? Whoops, flatworm. Okay, maybe not a worm, but you get the idea. It wasn't just lying there for fun, it was lying there to kill. Then there's eriops, another late Permian superstar. These guys were big, up to 2 meters long, with massive jaws and hundreds of tiny teeth. The flatness helped them lie in shallow rivers, perfectly camouflaged. Imagine a predator that's literally shaped like a school bus pancake, lying in the water, waiting for dinner. The only thing missing was a sign saying, "Please swim closer, I promise I won't bite." Spoiler, it did bite. Hard. Fossils back this up. We found flattened skeletons with tiny fish skeletons still inside their throats. Trackways show them creeping slowly, stealthy and deliberate, hugging the mud like they were auditioning for a role in a horror movie. Bite marks on other amphibians? Everywhere. Cannibalism? Check. They weren't picky. Anything that moved, or didn't move fast enough, was fair game. One fossil even shows a platyhystrix with what might have been another smaller amphibian partially in its mouth. Yeah, someone's lunch didn't go according to plan. And the strategy was genius. Eyes on top, body flat, waiting for prey to wander into range. Then, snap. Fast, lethal, messy. Flatness didn't just help them ambush prey, it helped them survive the predators above them. Gorgonopsids, the saber-toothed reptiles of the time, might have hunted near the water, but these flattened amphibians had a secret weapon, being hard to see, hard to hit, and awkward to swallow. In shallow waters, the pancake amphibians were practically untouchable. Imagine being a fish or a tiny amphibian back then. One second you're swimming along, thinking life is calm, the next you're lunch for a creature that barely looks alive until it's too late. Not ideal, to say the least. Some modern animals try similar tactics. The crocodile, the flatfish, but these guys were the originals. They didn't just sit there. They stalked, they ambushed, they dominated. The carnivorous pancake era wasn't about speed or chasing down prey. It was about strategy, stealth, and a low-slung body plan that evolution absolutely nailed. Flatness became their superpower, their disguise, their "I'm just a harmless mud rug, trust me" look. And like any good predator, they were terrifyingly patient. A fish could swim past them for hours without realizing the danger, until, bam, the jaws closed. So yeah, by the time the late Permian swamps reached their peak weirdness, amphibians weren't the timid bug catchers you'd expect. They had become walking, swimming, snapping pancakes. Low, wide, hungry, and unapologetic. The swamp floor had its own predators now, and if you were small enough to fit inside their mouth, it was a bad day. By now, you might be imagining these carnivorous pancakes as small, squishy threats. Wrong. Some of these flattened temnospondyls were absolute monsters. Eriops, for example, could stretch over 2 meters long, basically the length of a small canoe, and weigh hundreds of kilograms. That's not a pond critter, that's a swamp floor juggernaut, flat enough to sneak along the mud, but big enough to swallow smaller amphibians whole without breaking a sweat. If a modern alligator decided to flatten itself and go full stealth mode, you'd have something close. But make no mistake, these were amphibians, not reptiles, which made them even more unusual predators in the late Permian ecosystem. These creatures were apex predators of shallow water. Sure, there were gorgonopsids prowling nearby, saber-toothed reptilian nightmares, but in their murky, shallow rivers and swamp floors, the carnivorous pancakes held sway. Their size and flatness gave them a perfect ambush setup. One wrong move by a fish or tiny reptile, and it was game over. Fossil evidence shows partially digested prey inside flattened temnospondyls, bite marks on fellow amphibians, and even potential cannibalism. Basically, if you weren't a gorgonopsid or another giant predator, you were lunch. Scale mattered too. Some species weren't just long, they were wide. Platyhystrix, while not as massive in length as Ariops, had a body shape that spread across the swamp floor, almost like a living rug. Fish swimming near the water's surface might mistake the pancake for mud or vegetation. The moment they got too close, those teeth came out like a trap snapping shut. For smaller animals, the difference between life and death was the width of the pancake. It wasn't just the flatness that made them effective, it was the predator hierarchy of the time. The swamps were crowded with competing species, each vying for food. Flat-bodied amphibians could hunt without being noticed, effectively sidestepping competition with taller or faster predators. Their low profile made it nearly impossible for larger predators to see them unless they were actively looking at the water's edge. And let's be honest, who looks for a 2-meter-wide, flat, toothy death machine lying in the mud? The strategy worked. Trackways preserved in fossil beds suggest these creatures weren't reckless. They crept slowly, conserving energy, letting prey wander into striking distance. It's almost comical, a huge amphibian lying perfectly still, pretending to be nothing more than swamp mud, while fish, smaller amphibians, and unlucky reptiles swam by, totally oblivious. Imagine a school bus flat on the ground, motionless, eyes barely above the surface, snapping jaws at anything small enough to fit inside its mouth. Yeah, bad day to be a fish. Even more fascinating is that these pancakes weren't limited to a single region. Fossils from the Karoo Basin in South Africa, petrified forest sites in Russia, and Zechstein deposits in Germany suggest this flat predator phenomenon was widespread. It wasn't an isolated quirk of evolution, it was a strategy that worked. Wide, low, and hungry, these amphibians dominated their swampy niche, leaving other creatures to adapt, flee, or die. In short, size and scale, combined with pancake-flat anatomy, turned ordinary amphibians into stealth predators with serious range. They weren't fast, but they didn't need to be. Everything else did the running for them, directly into their mouths. They were patient, powerful, and, let's face it, kind of terrifying. And while the gorgonopsids and other apex predators roamed the land, the carnivorous pancakes owned the swamps. If you think all of this sounds like a horror movie pitched by nature, wait until we dig into the fossil record. Because it's basically a prehistoric CSI scene, but with more teeth and less common sense. The evidence for these carnivorous pancakes isn't just in bones lying around. It's in bite marks, stomach contents, trackways, and even fossils that caught them in the act of eating. Yeah, bad day for someone, hundreds of millions of years ago. Let's start with South Africa's Karoo Basin, a hotspot for late Permian fossils. Here, paleontologists have unearthed flattened temnospondyl skeletons with smaller amphibian or fish remains preserved in their guts. That's right, fossils inside fossils. Imagine a sandwich fossilized mid-bite. It's gruesome, it's messy, and it's remarkably informative. These discoveries tell us exactly what these predators were snacking on, and it's not limited to fish. Tiny amphibians, unlucky reptiles, even fellow temnospondyls made it onto the menu. Cannibalism? Check. Opportunistic feeding? Double check. Then there are the bite marks. Fossils from Germany's Zechstein deposits show flat-bodied temnospondyls leaving impressions on bones that match their tiny but numerous teeth. Not just random gnawing either. These were precise strikes, aimed to immobilize and subdue prey quickly. One fossil shows a small reptile partially bitten, a clear, oops, wrong place at the wrong time moment frozen in stone. It's almost cinematic. A flat predator lying in wait, jaws snapping shut, prey frozen in mid-panic. How rude. Trackways add another layer to this crime scene. Paleontologists studying the sediment patterns in Russia and South Africa noticed wide, shallow impressions, consistent with flat-bodied, slow-moving creatures. The tracks show calculated movement, slow, deliberate, hugging the mud like the swamp floor itself had a pulse. Predators that relied on stealth rather than speed, these amphibians didn't chase prey. They waited for it to come to them. Think of it like a sticky trap, only alive, toothy, and several meters long. Not ideal if you were trying to make it to the next plant cluster. Some of the most dramatic fossils are those that capture interaction, predator and prey together. One specimen from Russia preserves a flattened temnospondyl with a smaller amphibian still lodged in its jaws. It's like a frozen action scene, a prehistoric ambush perfectly timed and preserved for the ages. The jaw's closure is permanent, the tiny victim forever part of the predator's final meal. It's an unnerving yet fascinating glimpse into late Permian life. These fossils don't just tell us what happened, they hint at behavior. Flattened bodies, wide spreads, eyes positioned on top, preserved prey inside jaws. It all paints a picture of patient predators. They didn't rush. They didn't waste energy. They waited, sometimes for hours, for a fish or amphibian to wander within range. Evolution made them slow, low, and flat for one reason: efficiency. And the fossil record? It's a crime scene frozen in time, revealing just how ruthless this strategy could be. So yeah, these aren't just bones. They're evidence of strategy, of stealth, of ambush, and of very bad days for anyone smaller than the pancake predator. Paleontology isn't always about reconstruction or guessing. It's about seeing the story etched into stone. And in this case, the story is gruesome, precise, and kind of hilarious if you like imagining a flat, toothy amphibian patiently waiting while dinner swims by completely clueless. As incredible as the carnivorous pancakes were, even the most cunning ambush predator can't outrun a global disaster. Around 252 million years ago, the Permian-Triassic extinction hit, what scientists now call the Great Dying. About 90% of marine species and 70% of terrestrial vertebrates vanished. That includes the low, wide, toothy terrors that once ruled the swamps. The carnivorous pancakes didn't just fade away. The swamps they depended on collapsed, the oxygen levels dropped, and the entire late Permian world went up in flames, metaphorically speaking. Flat, stealthy predators were suddenly out of a job. Before the extinction, they had thrived for millions of years, dominating shallow waters, stalking prey, and redefining what it meant to be an amphibian. After the extinction, the ecological niches they occupied, shallow water ambush predator, opened up for new species. Early archosaurs and later crocodilomorphs would take over the role of stealthy, low-profile predators. But nothing would quite replicate the bizarre combination of flatness, patience, and carnivorous efficiency that temnospondyls had perfected. Some lineages of temnospondyls survived into the Triassic, but by then, the extreme pancake-like forms were mostly gone. The world was changing, rivers were drying, continents were shifting, and predators were evolving new tricks. Even the survivors shrank, adapted, or moved to entirely different habitats. You could say that the flat amphibian rulebook had been written, published, and then promptly burned by extinction-level events. Yet their legacy remains in subtle ways. Modern amphibians, like flat-headed salamanders or aquatic ambush predators, carry traces of the strategies perfected by their ancient cousins. Flattening as a survival strategy, patient ambush hunting, and low-to-the-ground stalking. These are evolutionary lessons written in fossilized stone. And let's not forget the behavioral patterns: lying in wait, using the environment as camouflage, and striking at the perfect moment. Ancient pancakes may be gone, but the tactics they pioneered echo through millions of years of evolutionary experimentation. So when you look at a salamander or a flatfish, think back 260 million years. Somewhere in a late Permian swamp, a giant, pancake-shaped predator was lying flat, eyes just above the water, waiting for an unsuspecting fish to swim by. A slow, patient, and terrifying predator that reshaped what amphibians could do. And then, suddenly, it was gone. Extinction doesn't care if you were clever, flat, or toothy. It just doesn't care. And that, perhaps, is the final chapter in the story of the carnivorous pancakes. Yeah, they were amazing. For a while. Until the world went kaboom. So there you have it. The story of amphibians that went from harmless swamp dwellers to flat, toothy, carnivorous predators. From the lush, competitive late Permian wetlands to their stealthy, pancake-shaped ambush tactics, we saw how evolution turned ordinary amphibians into apex predators of the swamp floor. Fossils, bite marks, and trackways give us a front-row seat to their deadly strategy. And while they eventually disappeared in the Permian-Triassic extinction, their legacy lives on in the tactics of modern ambush predators. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever encountered something in nature that made your jaw drop like a prehistoric fish? Comment below. And of course, if you enjoyed this dive into ancient swamp drama, like, share, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel. Your support helps me bring these stories to life. Remember, we're in this ancient adventure together.